What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo channel. And first time, we are doing our college football solo strategy show. We have a game tonight. It is Jacksonville State taking on UAB. I'm super excited for it. Before we get started, make sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We'll have all sorts of college football content this year, videos like this, live before locks, you name it, and we will have it. Also, make sure to check out the site. We have our college football package ready to go. Projections, depth charts, slate write-ups, everything you could possibly want for this season. And today we are going to get into this showdown contest. Talks Jacksonville State, talk UAB, and show you a little bit what we have to offer. This game is a really interesting one to target just right away. We have UAB favored by 14.5 points. And the game overall implied just north of 45 points. So it is an interesting one to target here, but we are going to go team by team and discuss these two options we have today. So getting started with this, we'll take you to the Jacksonville State side of things and take a look at what we have. Interestingly, this Jacksonville State team, they're playing at the FCS level. They're a fairly slow team, 67.5 plays per game. Their pass rate is just 40.3%. And in this game, they are implied for just 16.5 points. Again, we mentioned the spread. They are entering this game as 14.5 point underdogs. The total is 47.5. So it's not the most attractive game overall, but we do have a nice showdown contest. As far as what this team has to offer, they're a pretty strong FCS team. They went 10-3 last year. They actually had a win over Florida International 19-10, where they actually had two 100-yard rushers. But the thing that stands out first and foremost with Jacksonville State is their starting quarterback is the cheaper option on both platforms. Zerrick Cooper is projected to start this game. He's the former Clemson transfer, and he was hurt last year with an ankle injury. He did complete 67% of his passes for 671 yards. When healthy, he also has dual threat ability, rushed for 83 yards and 5 touchdowns on 41 attempts last year. Zion Webb is the backup. He ended up playing a good amount last year when Zerrick Cooper was injured, which is why he's more expensive. But Cooper is a pretty nice option here on both platforms just because he is the cheaper option. And on FanDuel in particular, 8K is a strong price to pay for Zerrick Cooper. Now, in the running back room, you're going to see a 3-man committee, which has somewhat been reduced to 2. Pat Jackson is a guy that he played a lot early in the year and saw his opportunity decline. He had at least 9 carries in each of the first 5 games, but then never hit that mark again throughout the second half of the season for Jacksonville State. So we're not looking too heavily at Pat Jackson, but Josh Samuel and Uriah West could be options here. Samuel is the most efficient back on the ground, 773 yards last year, 8 scores, all in 139 carries, went for 163 against FIU. And then you have their other back, Uriah West. He also went over 100 yards against FIU. West was tied for third on the team in receiving as well with 17 catches, 195 yards. So he could be an option you look to as a pass catching back if UAB does get up in the game. But last thing to mention with this Jacksonville State team, they're losing a lot at pass catcher. They lost Trey Berry, they lost Logan McVay, and Jared Scott. So their leading returner is Dave Russell. He's pretty expensive on both platforms, caught 25 balls for 340 yards last year. He ran the most routes on the team, even though he wasn't as productive as their tight end Trey Berry, who's now transferred to the FBS level. But they also return Ahmad Edwards. He's a guy that caught 17 balls for 284 yards. Michael Petway, he should receive more opportunities as the primary slot receiver. 91.3% of his snaps in the slot last year. He caught 17 of 29 targets for 229 yards and could be relied upon as more of an underneath option on today's slate. But you also have a wide receiver rotation expected. Jacksonville State's going to use multiple players. So Quan Jackson, Damon Johnston is a Duke transfer. Those are candidates to earn more snaps throughout the year. But I think the players you want to focus on are Petway, Edwards, and Dave Russell. And I don't know if any of them are great captain options outside of major tournaments. And I don't really want to captain a ton of UAB anyway, or excuse me, Jacksonville State anyway, because UAB is the team with the 31 implied team total, whereas Jacksonville State just sitting at 16.5. So if I am looking at Jacksonville State, it's probably more on FanDuel with a guy like Zerrick Cooper, who's the starter at just 8K flat, who does have some dual threat ability. But we will take a look at the UAB side of this now. They're a team that was pretty strong last year, and they're only a 14.5-point favorite here, which is my lean in the betting markets overall. But examining this team, they're fairly efficient in their pricing. Their quarterback, Tyler Johnston, was injured for most of last year. He is far and away the most expensive option on both teams, but for good reason. So Johnson, he is a player, again, coming back from injury, completed 59% of his passes when healthy, 843 yards and 7 touchdowns. He averages 8.7 yards per attempt, which is really strong, and he did cut down on his turnovers last year. He's an excellent dual threat as well, 359 yards and 247 yards in 2018 and 2019, respectively. Only 34 last year, but again, he was injured for most of the season, so he's going to be the most expensive play for a good reason. UAB is really run heavy. They only pass 40% of the time. They're fairly slow in plays per game, which makes sense for a run-heavy team. So having Johnson available as part of that run game is really important, and he's going to be the chalk when you talk about what people are going to use at the captain slot. Again, Zarek Cooper is pretty cheap, but he's on a team implied for just so many less points. And unfortunately, both these teams use running back by committee, so it's a little difficult to target some of these guys in captain slot outside of tournaments. But because the UAB backs have such a high implied team total, you could look to one of these players in your captain spot. Dwayne McBride is going to be splitting time with Jermaine Brown. They were listed as co-starters. McBride was the team's second leading rusher last year behind Spencer Brown, who departs to the NFL. But he was extremely productive, averaged 9.3 yards per carry, 439 yards on 47 attempts, but he did not catch a pass. And UAB is not a team that involves their backs in the pass game a ton, which is okay here because they're facing a Jacksonville State team as a huge favorite. But then you have Jermaine Brown listed as the co-starter. He is significantly cheaper on both platforms. And I think this is a guy you can look to if you're trying to save money. He's particularly cheap on DraftKings, where he's 8,100 in the captain slot. FanDuel, he's just a middling play. But on DraftKings in particular, you're getting a really strong value here. And Jermaine Brown carried 63 times, 4 yards per carry. He also caught 8 passes, so he could be used as the main pass catching back. He's going to be a strong option here. UAB loses a lot at receiver. Austin Watkins and Myron Mitchell are gone. They're the top 2 pass catchers from last year. But Trey Shropshire's back, caught 14 passes for 311 yards and 2 scores. Mainly a downfield threat, averaged 22.2 yards per reception. Pretty expensive when you have the backs available, in my opinion. I would rather get to somebody like Jermaine Brown on DraftKings for that price. Shropshire on FanDuel could be a little bit of a better option. You save some money with him. But from there, the depth chart is a little bit unsettled just because you're replacing so much. The other clear starter was Ryan Davis. He only caught 3 passes for 45 yards last year, but he projects to take over the slot role. And the final starting receiver position for UAB was listed as a timeshare between Samario Rudolph and Ray J. Johnson Sanders. They were listed as co-starters. Rudolph caught 3 passes last year. Johnson Sanders reeled in 2. So it's 2 very unproven players here in the back of this roster. But like Ray J. Johnson Sanders is really cheap on DraftKings as well. You can get him for $4,500. He's a potential option. The only worry with targeting one of those really cheap receivers is UAB is not only going to rotate them between Samaria Rudolph and Ray J. Johnson Sanders, but they use 12 personnel a ton with 2 tight ends, and that's going to be Hayden Pittman and Garrett Prince on the field a lot. Now, I think Pittman's a much better option. He was 4th in yards. Garrett Prince was 5th, but Prince relied mainly on touchdowns. He only caught 9 passes last year, but 4 of them were touchdowns. If you look at routes run, Pittman actually ran a lot more routes than Prince, 142 to 92. So that, of course, is going to be something to look at here. And then the last thing I'll mention, if you go to the kicking game, kickers are viable on these showdown slates. For Jacksonville State, you're going to use Alan Karajic. He made 14 of 19 field goals last year, 42 of 44 extra points. He's a little less interesting than UAB's kicker, who's Matt Quinn. He made 31 of 32 extra points, 11 of 12 field goals. Slightly more expensive for Matt Quinn, but he's on a team with a higher implied team total, and he's a little bit better kicker overall. So just to recap, strong captains coming on UAB in the backfield, looking at a guy like Dwayne McBride and Jermaine Brown being a little cheaper. Taking a flyer on a receiver like Trey Shropshire and Ryan Davis. Quarterback Tyler Johnson should be the chalk for good reason. He's a strong dual threat. And then on the Jacksonville State side, Zarek Cooper comes in really cheap. I think he's a captain option and contrarian lineups. And then cheap fillers on this side of the ball are going to be players like Michael Petway, Ahmad Edwards, and in the backfield, Uriah West and Josh Samuel. But that will do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching the debut breakdown showdown heading into week 1, Jacksonville State UAB. Hit the thumbs up button before you head out. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and make sure to check out Awesemo.com to see everything we have to offer for college football. I'm Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski, and we will see you again next time.